strategies closer to your chest, which I do think will work out as an advantage. But Nick, true to his word, sending out that Tailwind Pokemon to ensure that Ogerpon should go first, unless we see like a Sucker Punch or something from the Urshifu.
Yeah, Nick thinking about going fast here. Tornadus with the Tailwind, with the Hearthflame Ogerpon. Arbin going for the Bash Bears, Urshifu and Ursaluna on the field. That is huge damage being threatened by both of those Pokemon. Of course, the Ogerpon is able to deal big damage back if it goes first, but Ogerpon can only deal with one of these at a time.
I will say that Tornadus has a couple of options for speed control here. It could honestly go straight for Icy Wind if it wants to try and deal a little bit more damage to that Ursaluna in particular, but you can also just go straight for your Fire-type Terastallization, get that Embody aspect, attack boost, and deal more damage that way. Nick certainly has found the most offensive start to this critical top 4 match.
Oh, well, it's going to be matched by another Terastallization coming out from Arbin's side. That's going to be the Ursaluna. Normal-type Pokemon now out on the field, doubling up, getting an extreme boost to those Hyper Voices and the Blood Moon on that Pokemon. Like you say, going for the Icy Wind, picking up chip damage on both Pokemon and dropping their speed. This Hearthflame Ogerpon will get a chance to fire back. It's a Wood Hammer into the Urshifu. Did not lock into Sucker Punch, picks up that KO after the Icy Wind. But now it has to take this Hyper Voice coming out from the Ursaluna, and after the recoil, this is probably big damage to both of those Pokemon. Picks up a KO on Ogerpon and almost one-hit KOs the Tornadus.
Critically, though, that Tornadus is able to hold on, and with the lack of extreme speed as we know it in this matchup, there is no opportunity for this Tornadus to not set up Tailwind if that's what Nick decides he wants. And I think that's exactly why we see Arbin swap in that Farigiraf. If you can catch your opponent going for a Tailwind and you go for Trick Room, that is absolutely huge. There's also the possibility for Arbin to go for a Helping Hand to just boost that Ursaluna's damage even further, as Nick has a tough decision to make here. His single striker Shifu can only attack one Pokemon. If you're worried about Trick Room being set up, you go for the Wicked Blow into that Farigiraf and you add some additional damage from that Tornadus on top of it with a Bleak Wind Storm. But if you're worried about your opponent dealing damage, you have to consider the knockout on the Ursaluna, and that's exactly what Nick does.
Goes for the knockout on the Ursaluna after good damage from the Bleak Wind Storm on both the Farigiraf and the Blood Moon Ursaluna. That will drop the defenses of the single strike Urshifu on Nick's side, but with the Focus Sash, it does not care. It is not being threatened with a one-hit KO at all. The Hyper Voice coming out from Arbin's Farigiraf will pick up the KO on the Tornadus and activate the Throat Spray and bring that Urshifu down to one more hit from either this Flutter Mane or the Farigiraf if it has the option. And here is the Iron Hands on the switch-in.
That is so unfortunate that Nick opted to go for Bleak Wind Storm that previous turn, as now this Flutter Mane, assuming it is as fast as it can be, should be able to outspeed the Urshifu on the opposing side of the field. You can't Sucker Punch as long as that Armor Tail ability is active as well. So this seems like a very simple Helping Hand Fairy type attack. Urshifu trying to withstand it, but without an Assault Vest on that Iron Hands, this might be a knockout for that Pokemon.
Yeah, there's no Terastallization, but there's no Assault Vest on the Iron Hands. The Dazzling Gleam almost picks up the KO. It is faster than the Farigiraf. Picks up the one-hit KO on Flutter Mane with the Heavy Slam. That Pokemon is off the field. Iron Hands is still here. Farigiraf not going for a Trick Room, goes for a Hyper Voice. That will pick up the KO on the Iron Hands, but Urshifu now is staring down the long neck of the Farigiraf, ready to fire off a Wicked Blow.
That is incredible training from Nick, knowing that if Arbin went for that Dazzling Gleam, the Iron Hands had enough bulk to take that hit and return a KO with Heavy Slam. Had that turn played out any other way, Arbin would have found the opportunity to win this game, but Iron Hands, one of the bulkiest Pokemon in the previous regulations for Scarlet and Violet, showcasing that it is not quite out of the metagame just yet.
Who needs Assault Vest if you're an Iron Hands? This Pokemon is still good, especially on these Trick Room teams. And that Icy Wind drop, the Bleak Wind Storm drops becoming huge to make sure that that Iron Hands could go first and defeat that Farigiraf. Huge moments here from the Iron Hands, those like mixed Tailwind Trick Room Pokemon. You never quite know what's going to happen.
Exactly, and I think this just goes back again to Nick's interview. You want to go first, you want to go fast, and you know, I think going into the previous regulations, people either ignored the Iron Hand speed entirely or opted to not train it in speed. You know, maybe find one of those no good speed Iron Hands to be as slow as physically possible. But Nick opting to probably at least invest a little bit in speed, maybe
okay speed.
An okay speed, yeah, to ensure that after an Icy Wind, after a Bleak Wind Storm speed drop, or even just a Tailwind, the Iron Hands would be able to outspeed key Pokemon like Farigiraf to lock in the knockout. That is great preparation from Nick, and I think going into game number 2, it's probably very tempting for Arbin to fall back on that Trick Room mode, as it seems like he just did not have the speed to match Nick.
Absolutely, especially with Nick showing that he was more than willing to just click Icy Wind, click Bleak Wind Storm, and have this potential Tailwind mode. So at any moment, Nick could decide to turn up the heat. Arbin sees the Tornadus Urshifu lead and matches with his own. But here we see some of the major differences between these two teams. Arbin running the Air Slash Tornadus instead of the Bleak Wind Storm, running the Choice Band Urshifu instead of the Focus Sash. So a lot of actually small issues here for both players.
I know, this is all going to come down to predictions. We do see Arbin's Tornadus move first with the Tailwind, outspeeding Taunt from the opposing Tornadus. That is absolutely huge for Arbin, getting a speed advantage with the combination of that Wicked Blow.
It's just a prank, Tornadus. Avoiding the taunt with that prankster Tailwind. Urshifu will go down to the close combat on Nick's side, so Arbin has traded an offensive threat to get a support threat off the field and to ensure that Arbin will have the speed advantage for the next few turns, unless Nicholas can find a way to get Trick Room up for himself.
Well, if he made an adaptation from game number 1 and brought his own Farigiraf, that is certainly something that is on the table. That being said, we see the reveal of Fluttermane once again from Arbin, and it's Iron Hands for Nick. This Fluttermane is in just as good a position as we saw it in the previous matchup. Could even possibly terrestrialize a turn later when Fake Out is no longer a threat to deal even more damage with those Dazzling Gleams. Nick is in a very tough spot here. I think you really have to pick the Fluttermane to focus in on, as that is the Pokemon that's going to deal so much damage in this position, especially with speed control.
Well, Arbin has options to block the Sucker Punches and the Fake Out, has the Farigiraf in the back, not opting to bring that in, instead opting to go for the Terrestrialization on Fluttermane. Going to be Fairy Terra, trying to boost the power of this Fluttermane's Fairy-type attacks. Was sad to see that Dazzling Gleam just miss out on the Iron Hands in Game 1, but Nick is going to counter with a Terrestrialization of his own. The Iron Hands removing the weakness to Fairy typing, switching into the Grass typing, but crucially opening itself up to an Air Slash from that Tornadus.
This is a tough prediction to make. We do see another adaptation from Arbin. Moonblast into the Iron Hands. It's not enough.
The same damage. Not enough damage to pick up the one-hit KO on the Iron Hands. Tornadus has to finish it off with the Air Slash, which fortunately connects. but now Iron Hands is down, and this Urshifu gets to fire off a free attack. A wicked blow connects onto the Tornadus, and Nick says, oh, you think only your choice band Urshifu can pick up that one-hit KO? My Focus Sash can do it too.
That's actually good information. I mean, thinking back to the Rapid Striker Shifu, those Surging Strikes didn't necessarily get that knockout, but we do see a final adaptation here for Nick, bringing the Ogerpon as his final Pokemon against the Farigiraf again from Arbin. Urshifu, yes, it did get a knockout on that Tornadus, but I do wonder if the Farigiraf being on the field is more advantageous for Arbin right now, as he can block Sucker Punches from the Urshifu. He can choose to boost the damage of that Fluttermane even further with an Helping Hand. But, you know, Fluttermane is locked into Moonblast, which might work out to Nicholas's advantage. Ogerpon took that somewhat comfortably.
Ogerpon took a good amount of damage, but not quite enough for a one-hit KO, and survives the Hyper Voice. Without the Throat Spray, Arbin can't pick up that KO, and Nick absolutely refuses to protect this Urshifu. Ogerpon fires off an Ivy Cudgel into the Farigiraf, just barely misses the KO there, and there is the cleanup crew from Urshifu. A critical hit into Farigiraf, and this Fluttermane is locked into Moonblast. It can only deal damage to one of these Pokemon at a time.
What a tough call to make there with the Farigiraf. Do you go for a Helping Hand damage boost, or do you hope that Hyper Voice is going to deal enough damage to close the game out? We see a follow me from the Ogerpon. There is no Sucker Punch yet from this Urshifu. How much is this Wicked Blow going to do?
This Wicked Blow followed by a Sucker Punch is going to be so close on this Fluttermane. It all comes down to how these trainers have trained their Pokemon. That Wicked Blow did so much damage into the Fluttermane with that critical hit. The Tailwind peters out, and it will be one Moonblast into a Sucker Punch to see if Nick is going to be in the finals. The Sucker Punch picks up the KO. Nick Donnelly, his first day 2, his first top cut, his first semifinals, his first finals in Charlotte.